Pastor Matt, I'm excited to have you here. Everybody, this is Talking Bibles. Today we're here with Pastor Matthew Everhard, one of my favorite YouTubers. I'm going to post all the links for everything we talk about in the description below. Pastor Matt, can you introduce yourself, please?
What's up, everybody? My name is Matt. I'm the pastor of Gospel Fellowship PCA. We're a conservative Presbyterian church just north of Pittsburgh, so if you're looking for a place to worship, come visit us, Gospel Fellowship PCA.
We kind of capped off the last episode with talking about study habits, note-taking, and you mentioned your wide margin.
Yeah.
And the use of wide margins in studying. Now, the wide margin that was so influential on me was the Eagle. You know, you named it. The Eagle.
Yep,
yeah,
right.
And it's the Cambridge Wide Margin, ESV.
Yeah.
And I think most people, any Cambridge Wide Margin is referred to as the Eagle now. That's how influential those videos were to this community. But also, you've been using the Crossway Heirloom Wide Margin.
That's
which
this guy right here.
I personally love. That's one of my favorite Bibles. So I kind of want to get your take on the differences between the two. Pros and cons between the Cambridge Wide Margin, and now I know we're saying Heirloom Wide Margin. The Heirloom Wide Margin you guys are probably about to buy, it's not going to be the same Heirloom Wide Margin that I have, and not going to be the same Heirloom Wide Margin that Matt has. So those were Youngblood produced, so we're probably going to be talking about a little different quality level than if you were to get a Chinese produced Heirloom Wide Margin.
Well, I don't even know that the Heirloom Wide Margin is going to be made anymore. I don't see it on Crossway's website. Have you even heard if they're gonna make that one in the future?
You know, I haven't heard about an Heirloom Wide Margin. They did just make the new verse by verse preaching Bible, and it's a wide margin. So they might consider that to be their Heirloom Wide Margin, even though it's single column versus a double column reference edition. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do there, but I was very pleased with the verse by verse preaching Bible. I know I saw your review. It's an amazing Bible. It really is. They made so many great advancements, or at least changes, from the original version that was not verse by verse. But anyway, so I haven't heard about them producing a new Heirloom Wide Margin that's similar to the Youngblood version. But there's still the wide margin being produced from Crossway. It might not be the Heirloom version.
Okay, well, let me go back to the Eagle just for a moment, because I guess that's the one that I'm most associated with. Ironically, I'm not using it anymore, which is kind of a twist of fate there. But the Eagle, the Wide Margin by Cambridge, had been my standard go-to everyday Bible for several years. I think at least 5 years, which is probably the longest I've ever used any one Bible, because it was just so amazing. I was just enthralled with the idea of this wide open margins to take notes in. And it was my preaching Bible, it was my study Bible, and then when I paired it with the Pit Minion, it's just brilliant to pair a big Bible and a small Bible together, like the Eagle and the Pit Minion go together so perfectly. That was my go-to standard for years and years, and they match perfectly, because the Pit Minion you can get in your jeans pocket, and your Eagle is big, but it's got so much space, and so that tandem together was brilliant for me for a long time. And in some ways, I kind of long for those days of yesteryear, but I stopped using them as my primary everyday go-tos for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is because I changed churches, and I've been at Gospel Fellowship now for just over a year. Before that, I'd been at Faith Church in Brooksville, Florida for about 11 years. And when I moved churches, there was just something, I can't quite describe what was happening in my heart at that time, because there was a lot of joy to move closer to home, but there was also some pain in leaving behind a good church that I loved. And I just felt like I needed a clean slate in a lot of different ways. And even to look back on all of my notes from all my sermons at Faith Church, it was just kind of like a weird sentimental thing that I was like, you know what, I think I need a clean start. And so I set aside those Bibles. I still love them. I still have them. I still consult the Wide Margin for its notes. In fact, I'm transferring a lot of those notes into my Crossway Heirloom. but I just kind of needed that fresh start. And the other thing that always bothered me just a tiniest little bit about having two Bibles as my daily drivers is that I kind of kept thinking in my heart, well, there's got to be one Bible that could combine the usefulness of both. There's got to be one Bible with plenty of room to write, but also a little bit more portable and a little bit more easy to handle when I'm actually preaching in the pulpit. And that's where I switched over to the Crossway published Heirloom Wide Margin Reference Bible, which I am now using as my everyday daily driver. Now, there's some losses. Amazing. The biggest loss that I really, really lament, besides my notes, 5 years of notes, is the paper just leaves something to be desired. Yeah, it's thinner. The Eagle Wide Margin by Cambridge is the best Bible paper in any Bible I've ever handled in my entire life. It's just beautiful. And the Heirloom by Crossway that's good paper too. But it's very thin, and I like to think of it as like spider web paper because it's very thin, but it's very strong, and it's actually quite opaque for being so thin. But it has a little bit of a crinkly sound to it, and it feels like tissue paper in the hand. It's just not that thick, rich, milky paper that Cambridge had, and I miss that.
Now, what do you think about the paper quality in the new Chinese printed preaching Bible? I think it's pretty fantastic. I was pretty blown away by how good the paper quality was.
Yeah, I like it, and I'll say this, and I'm not sure about the politics of Chinese prints and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole lot of moral things to think through when it comes to production in China. But as far as the paper goes, I've always actually liked the paper of the new Crossway prints. It's not the paper that's the problem with the new Crossways. A lot of it's been in the production, the finishing, the touches, the imprecision that just doesn't meet up with Youngblood standards. But I've always liked the paper. The paper's fine. It's nice. It's thick. It's rich. It takes ink really well. No problems there at all.
Yeah, I've said that in several reviews. The Nomega, even when I really heavily criticized the Nomega, which was my first Bible that when they moved production from Youngblood to China, they called it the Nomega more for the cover quality and the trimmings. They're just
exactly
the problem I had was the retail. That's the problem.
They didn't reduce the price.
The retail did not change.
No.
Yeah, the retail did not change from when it was a Youngblood production until going to China. If the retail had changed, I would not have been so rough on it. But when you're asking the same price for lower quality, then I'm not going to sit back and just let that happen. Saying all that, I reviewed the Nomega, the Heirloom Thin Line, the Heirloom Credo, and all of those have fantastic paper. None are better than the first generation preaching Bible from Crossway and the second generation preaching Bible. Both have amazing paper, and they're all Chinese printed. So it's really not about the block. It's not about the paper. It's more about the trimmings.
But don't you think, though, with the new, this is the new preaching Bible, the new verse by verse one, which is awesome. I've always wanted a wide margin verse by verse. I think that's a great field that should be explored more. But don't you feel that the cover is a little bit thin considering the size of the text block? Yeah. I mean, that's my problem with this one, is that if you're going to have a big, heavy block, that's totally cool. Because that's a space that it's worthy of having some good Bibles. But then you have to have a cover that substantiates that block, right? It's a little bit too wimpy. If you hold it, the cover's kind of peeling back on you a little bit. It's beautiful, soft leather. I love the feel of the leather. I'm just not sure it's strong enough really to protect that heavy of a Bible.
And I've explained at least the cover relationship on Edgeline Bibles. The strength in the binding, the strength in the integrity of how it holds together comes down to the liner quality. 100% liner quality. I don't care if you put plastic on the outside. If you have a good liner quality, this thing's going to hold together. And I made a point, one of the things that I was really unhappy with on the new verse by verse was the much thinner, lower quality leather on the liner.
Yeah, and now it feels nice and soft, though. It
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
good.
it
Mine,
feels
mine is
great.
like, yeah,
But what we've
yeah.
got to learn is it's not about texture; it's about integrity. And I would rather have a liner that feels more rigid, that we know is going to hold up, than have one that's going to be soft and pliable, super flexible, and it's going to tear apart. I would still be hesitant if I'm you, and you're used to reading from an heirloom wide margin from Youngblood. And even the Cambridge wide margin has a synthetic liner, but it's still a higher quality than this super thin doo-doo liner that's in these some of these Crossway Chinese editions. And it's not a China thing either, because the Zondervan and Thomas Nelson producing and Holman producing quality premium Bibles in China, they have better liners. So this is purely a Crossway thing. This is purely a quality control thing that's going to cause problems later when Bibles start failing. Now, and I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they correct it fairly soon, like they did with the changes they made between first generation and second generation preaching Bible. I'm hoping that they'll start seeing that this is going to affect our survivability as a business, these decisions.
Don't you think they could have, like, let's say Crossway wants to save a little bit of money, which is fine. I think every business should be like keeping their costs low, and they have the prerogative to do that. But don't you think they could have gone to a synthetic liner like the Cambridge Eagle has, which would have saved some costs, because now you're using a polymer rather than a leather, but then you could still throw on that super premier goat skin on the top of that, and then you'd have the durability of what the Eagle had, and you'd have that extra strength to it, but you'd also save a little bit of money on the production side, because this Eagle right here, I've been using that thing for a long time. There is no problems with this liner, man, and this is a polymer liner, but it feels like a leather. This thing is strong. I couldn't tear this with my hands if I wanted to. This is an incredible choice of a material.
People that are Bible buyers, they might knock. And the thing is, I don't have a great relationship with Cambridge. I've tried to get review editions. I have issue with a lot of their marketing. And we're going to actually talk about Cambridge in the next episode. But you'll be surprised. The cost of that polymer liner is likely more expensive than that leather liner they put in from China.
No kidding.
I know that
did not
seems
know
surprising.
Yeah.
That seems surprising. But when they're sourcing a lot of these materials for production, they're going to use the absolute cheapest thing, which I hate that. I wish they would just set, like Cambridge, with all the faults they might have, they have a set production level expectation that is not going to be deferred from. And that is what I love. It doesn't change based on edition. You know that you're going to get this. And that way the consumer knows what to expect when they're purchasing from Cambridge. And they just do. I think we're missing that from Crossway. Now, I think people misunderstand that not all polymers are the same. And just like not all leathers are the same. And I promise you, I would be willing to bet a lot of money. I know, don't bet. I'm just joking. People, don't gamble. But I'm willing to say with a fair amount of certainty that the polymer liners used with Cambridge editions, which come from Youngblood, are actually more expensive than the leather liners in a lot of the Chinese editions that feel cheap. And you can tell, and you said it. If you pull it up with your hands and you try to rip it, that is literally the level of quality that how they're measured. I mean, that's like how much pressure it takes to tear this determines the quality level of this material.
Right.
I can say with a lot of certainty that these liners from Crossway they're going to cause issues because they're not very high quality liners. They did up the ante with a higher quality cover leather, but I think they had tons of complaints about the cover leather.
Too.
They're there in China. There is higher quality leather there. And this is the thing, and I don't mean to rant, but people will say, but it's a ministry. It's a non-profit. Well, that's even more of a reason. If you have to produce a higher level of quality product, then you just pass that cost on to the consumer, and people buy it. You know, if you're not in it for profit, that's even less of an excuse to produce a lower level quality product. It just doesn't make any sense. And now, if you were a company in it for profits, like that's essentially the opposite of a nonprofit. For those of you who are just catching up, if you're in it for a profit, then yeah, you'll want to cut the bottom line lower and lower and charge more and more. It's just either they have a bloated infrastructure, they have too much money spent in marketing, they're spending too much money somewhere because it's not going into the Bibles. It's not. They're still not as good as the HarperCollins editions, the Premier Collection. It's just a matter of how high of a quality you're willing to pay. And Zondervan and Thomas Nelson realize that is everything. Sorry, I went on a rant there.
It's okay. Hey, this is your show, man. You get to rant all you want.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the Schuyler wide margin ESV. Do you think you'd be willing to try out a Schuyler wide margin?
I would. In fact, I have one of the original Quentels going way back to when the Quentel first came out. In fact, I think I have one of the first that were ever made, because there used to be a blog way back in the day called I forget the name of it.
Bible Design Blog.
No, that was the original. That was the original. And then there was a blog that came out. A couple of guys were going to try to get something started that was similar. They wanted to actually sell Bibles, a Bible exchange, I think it was called, perhaps. And they got me to review one of the earliest Quentels, one of the first ones off the line. And so I have this green Quentel that's as early as the Quentel gets. It was probably one of the first ones made. It was an ESV, and it was one of the first ones made, and they sent it out for a review. It was back when I was writing reviews. I don't even write reviews anymore. They're all video now. And so that's awesome. So I've had several different Quentels. And I've never got the personal size Quentel though, which I'd love to have. And man, if they ended up doing a wide margin ESV, which it looks like they're going to, that would be an awesome Bible to have. I already have one complaint about it though, and that is that it looks from the specs like they're going to do the inner margin slightly less than the outer margin. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why some people do that, because obviously you're going to need to write on the inside as well as the outside. That's one thing I like about the Crossway Heirloom wide margin, is that they finally put the inner margin the same width as the outer margin.
I would argue that the inner margin should probably be even larger because it's harder to write in the gutter.
Yes, it should at least be
so
equal,
it's just
if not
really
slightly
tougher.
larger.
I think that's a good opportunity for Schuyler to get some awesome publicity if they sent, Matthew Everhard a ESV wide margin pre-release.
Who knows?
Hey, this is the wide margin note-taking guru, the man. I do want to point out that I'm excited about the ESV wide margin as well. I don't use the wide margin quite as much, but still excited to look at it and see how it goes.
Yeah.
But I want to see the relationship. As much as you love Jonathan Edwards, I don't know why you don't use the Interleaved journaling Bible, which, for those of you that don't know, it's where you have a page of scripture and then a complete blank sheet between each page of scripture. That was a thing that Jonathan Edwards, I don't know if he created it or if he just popularized it, but it's an amazing note-taking system. Now, it's going to give you a Bible that's enormous, ginormous, but do you have a take on the Interleaved?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I do use it. I didn't mention that earlier, but I have that Bible and I use it every morning. That Bible for me is going to become my final commentary on Scripture. So even as I'm jotting down notes in my wide margin, a little bit kind of ad hoc, throwing things in for whatever, my final notes are going into my Interleaved Bible from Crossway. It's an amazing Bible, and yes, it's designed after a Bible that Jonathan Edwards had.
All right, so let's do the lightning round.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is only going to be a couple of questions, but they're important, and you can expand on them however you want to. Verse by verse or paragraph format.
Man, I wish I could be a verse-by-verse guy because I love that idea, but I can't find the Bible that suits me well enough because there is no perfect wide margin reference verse-by-verse in 2 columns, which is a big deal for me. I got to have those 2 columns. So I would be verse-by-verse, but I can't find that Bible that exists. Somebody needs to make it.
Yeah, would you be willing to sacrifice the reference system for the extra space to be able to have the verse, because a verse by verse is going to make a larger Bible.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to sacrifice the reference system?
I guess so, but I do use the reference system quite a bit in my Bible, always have. So I'm not sure if I could make that sacrifice or not. I think I would.
All right, so final question of the lightning round. It's a big one.
Yep.
Give me front to back, design your favorite Bible.
Okay. Well, let's do it like this. It's a wide margin. It's not huge. It's a manageable size. It's 9x6. It's an ESV. For sure, it's in 2 columns, and I'd love to throw in verse-by-verse format in 2 columns, but it has to have some great paper. One of my favorite papers is that slightly cream-colored paper that Crossway uses in some of their journaling Bibles. I think that stuff's amazing.
That's like 60 GSM paper, right?
I love that paper. It's awesome.
I would like 1,000 GSM paper. Thank you. Thank you very much. That would be great. Like for me, I have like this navigator mind, and it helps me envision, places and things if I can see the map and draw on the map and stuff like that. So I would love to see like incredible maps, covering up larger sections, and I would love to have lined paper. Like that's an essential thing for me is lined paper, great paper in, front to back. Trim out all the stuff that's not needed that I can't use. I do like references, but it doesn't have to be the largest reference suite ever. But that's kind of where I'm at with design the perfect Bible.
Yeah, if there was a smaller reference suite and it just referenced the passages that quote each other, I think that would be good enough for me.
That's a good idea.
Where the New Testament
awesome
quotes the Old Testament, if it just had that.